chairman of the national research organization called UFO-Sweden. He's also head of the largest archive in the world when it comes to the unknown, which is the Archives for the Unexplained. And they got a website. It's a great website. I've been looking it over the past couple of days. He's been following UFOs since the late 60s and has been actively researching and investigating observations since 1974. So he's been doing this for more than a day. He's a retired journalist from Sweden's largest morning newspaper. And don't get mad at me, Clas, but I'm going to try. Dagens Nyheter.
Well, good enough.
Good enough. Okay, I'll take good enough. So the Archives for the Unexplained website is afu.se. Highly recommend it. It's really good. And then we do have a link for a few of his books on our website. So just go to northlandmufon.com and you'll see some links for some of his books. So with that, Mr. Svahn, the floor is yours. And thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me. It's nice to be on air over the Atlantic. And Anna, nice to see you again, of course. It was quite a few years ago now. We met the first time at MUFON conference in California, at Irvine. Yeah, I was just presented as I try to do myself here, but you were well read about me, so there's nothing really more to say. I will give my presentation in, you can say, 2 parts. I will talk slightly about the UFO-Sweden and a little more about AFU, the Archives for the Unexplained. I will also give you 2 different UFO reports that we did investigate and also found the explanation to, and then a couple of others that we have not found an explanation to. So this is what we publish. UFO-Sweden published 2 different magazines, one glossy magazine called UFO-Aktuellt, and one a little less glossy, which we publish only for our field investigators. The first one is printed in 1,400 copies, and the second one, Rapportnytt, is printed in 600 copies. And if you turn around the glossy magazine, you can see the other way around. You can read the Norwegian magazine UFO, because we work very closely with UFO Norway, and I should say it's the only organization in the world we are sharing the printed magazine we are doing, and we are publishing different stories, so it's not the same, and our languages are quite alike, so we can read each other language, so that's good. We also have this UFO.se, which are UFO-Sweden's website, and at this moment we are working together with a large Swedish TV company collecting reports on various strange phenomena, and that is why you see this strange figure in this picture. Usually we concentrate on UFOs, but since Swedish television are making a series about the unknown, we are helping them with collecting interesting observations and encounters. We are also, of course, on Facebook and Instagram and everything else. So very much like any other UFO group, I should say. But the most important thing we do, as you are, of course, as well, that is to go out, leave the house, and make interviews with witnesses. And some years ago, UFO-Sweden knocked doors in 5 different localities in Sweden, 5 different areas. We talked to 1,600 witnesses, or I should say just persons, and 10% of those 1,600 had seen something that they did not understand what it was. And nearly none of them had ever reported it to anyone. And Sweden is a small country, nearly 11 million people. So you could say from this door-to-door investigation that 1 million Swedes have seen something. that they don't understand, and nearly none of them has reported it to anyone. That makes it comparable to the 22,000 Swedish UFO cases we have in our archives. So nearly everything is still out there, not known to us. And I should say the same probably will go for the US. And every year since 1976, UFO-Sweden holds a field investigation trainee course for new and for old ufologists. We have educated 1,600 field investigators total, and of course most of them are not active, but quite a few are, and we educated another 50 last October. We also have very good relationships with the Swedish military. The happy guy to the left, that's me a couple of years ago, and here I meet with the head of the Defense Research Institute's archive, and at that point the head of the UFO desk to the right. I had asked them if they could scan all their UFO reports, so they put a man on duty for 3.5 months, scanning every report for us. And together it was a 1 terabyte hard drive, which I'm here receiving. And to illustrate the good relationship we have with the Swedish military, this citation is from another head of the UFO desk a couple of years ago. And as you can read here, she talks highly about both UFO-Sweden and, of course, the archives for the unexplained, which she says, to keep this archive in function is of great importance in my work. So, and yes, as you said earlier on, we are largest in the world, which means that we encompasses not only UFOs, but also any kind of unusual observation or experience. So lots of our holdings are representing the paranormal as well. We see the connection between ordinary UFO observations and paranormal observations and experiences. And so this is what AFU really do. We are dealing with UFOs, the paranormal, ancient mysteries, cryptozoology, astronomical enigmas, and unusual natural phenomena. We have paperworks from the most hardcore skeptics to the most suggestible believers, from letters to the editor to a doctoral thesis, and all there in between. We have not decided to take any special side. We want to share this with the world. And most of the things you find at AFU are not in Swedish, but in English and many, many other languages, of course. This is a short summary of AFU. 16 localities on the same street, which is, of course, idiotic in many ways. It's 8,000 square feet altogether and 4,200 yards of bookshelves. Why do we have 16 localities on the same street? It's because that we rented one from the beginning and rented another one when we outgrow the first one, and yeah, doing that from year to year. But now we are looking to put everything under one roof, and that is really the aim of my work as chairman for AFU right now. I work very hard to find money and the locality, and we had a very, very nice meeting a week ago with some would-be benefactors and donators. Our aim is to save archives for posterity and to make them available for researchers now. And on this picture you can see our librarian, Ingrid Kolberg to the right, and our head of day-to-day activities, Anders Liljegren. We give you some very, very short glimpses of what we have in the files. This is a Russian samizdat book. We have several of them. They were written during the Soviet era, underground, on a typewriter, and were produced in limited kind of copies, maybe 5 or 6 copies. They were written on typewriter, as I said, but the illustrations were made by hand. A new illustration in every new copy they made. We also have loads of UFO reports. We have 12,400 reports from Britain, and I speak about original reports. This is not copies, this is the original stuff. We have more than 1,000 Russian UFO reports, including a copy of what we could find from the KGB archives, which I, in 1993, were able to make a copy of when visiting Moscow. Danish, Norwegian, and Finnish UFO files, of course, and some nice gems. This is one of the most well-known cases in the world, the aerial school sighting in September 1994, when a full school of students saw what they thought was a landing craft and maybe also an entity beside it. And this is the original stuff. This is the drawings made by the pupils, and also the report made by Cynthia Hind, who was the principal investigator who went to the site just a couple of days after it happened. This I saved from a cupboard in outside London. This is Father Gill, Papua New Guinea, 1959 report. And we also have Blue Book microfilms, the US Air Force, 12,618 reports on microfilm. We have lots of original pictures of observers. This is, of course, the astronomer Clyde Tombaugh, discoverer of the planet Pluto, not the planet anymore, but he also in 1949 observed UFOs. This is Dr. Alan Hynek, a picture from the early 1970s. Also a unique picture, very seldom seen. We have the originals at AFU. And we have lots of pictures of UFOs. This is a George Adamski picture, very early print from 1951. We have this Stephen Derbyshire from Coniston, February 1954 in Great Britain. Sao Paulo, October the 13th, 1968, taken by a 15-year-old boy. The Almiro Baraunas pictures from Trindade, outside the coast of Brazil in 1958. And what you're talking about, that we have first generation prints of those. We don't have the negatives, but we have very, very, very good copies. We also have copies of the Swedish military files, besides the one I showed you on the 1 terabyte hard drive. There were other files we had found at the Swedish War Archives. And we are trying to make our work available. So some of this you can find on our download site. There you can go and download stuff for free. We have cleared magazines and printed works with the copyright holders and are publishing that for free for everyone to use. But most of the stuff we have is, of course, not online because they are with sensitive information about the observers' names and things like that. So I will now leave UFO-Sweden and AFU and say a few words about what I call the knowns, things that we have been able to find the explanation to. And the first case I want to show you started with an article in a Swedish newspaper. Was it a UFO she saw? It is the headline here in Swedish. It was published on October the 23rd, 2015. And the story was that this lady was traveling by car to the east on this road where you find this X, when she suddenly at that point met something very strange. It was in broad daylight, and she met a vehicle traveling in the opposite direction. It was very low, quite small, slightly seemed to hover above the road. And when she passed this vehicle, she saw that was someone sitting inside it, like a ball around this entity's head. This is her drawing of the encounter. So what could this be? What did it look like? We, of course, interviewed the witness, and then we put together a couple of field investigators trying to see what this could have been, this encounter. It was on the road, it was very near. Of course, it passed quite fast, in maybe 5 or 10 seconds, it was all over. But you can see this entity, man, whatever it is, looking out of a bulb of glass at the observer. So we thought that this looked like some kind of vehicle, a Velo mobile. There are only 7 of them in Sweden. You can find them on the internet. It looks quite strange. But who could be driving such a vehicle at that time? We screened the newspapers around the time of observation, and we found that there was a competition made by a German company traveling around the Baltic Sea. They were cycling those velomobiles around the Baltic Sea. But the question was for us to see, were they there at the point at that time? So I contacted the organizer of the tour, Josef Janning in Bonn in Germany, and there was a problem, because when he sent me the map of the road they were traveling not this way where the X is, but they turned left and traveled up to the north at the very left here on the map. So he showed the data we had, and he shared them with all the guys and girls who had been being into this competition. And one of them came back to me, Marcus Dieter. So I talked to him, I called him, and he told me that, of course, they should have traveled up to the left. But instead of going left, he mistakenly had traveled straight forward and turned around, going back again to the left, trying to find his track back. And he remembered meeting a lady looking terrified from the car, and he could prove by his GPS log that he had been there at the exact time. And this is his car. And when we presented this to the observer, she said, UFO-Sweden got it wrong. She didn't believe this at all. And of course, our aim is not to convince the witnesses that we are right. We are just trying to show them what we have done, our investigation. And of course, to me, this cupola looks very much like this goldfish ball, which the lady had described the entity looking up from. So we are quite convinced that she was meeting this velomobile at that point, and we know that there was a velomobile at that point. But she still doesn't believe us, and that's fine. We are not in it for convince her about what we are doing. And the second and last of my examples where we have found an explanation is something that happened October the 28th, 2012. A man called Stefan Johansson was driving his car on his way to his home outside Stockholm. I was at Mariestad, my hometown at that point, when I got a call from a newspaper called Aftonbladet. It was 2 hours after the observation. So I was able to talk to Stefan within 2 hours. And he described to me that he had been traveling, meeting this black triangle with a pulsating blue light. He described it how he saw it in distance and the object came closer and closer. So he stopped the car and went out of the car to take a better look. His testimony is like that. Stopped the car, I went out, I saw a black triangular object over me. It was so close that I could have hit it with a soda can if I had one. He went into the car again after the object had vanished, and he called his brother and told him about the sighting. He traveled back home and called the newspaper, who called me. So, what do we know? We know that he tells us from his memory that the observation was made around 7 p.m. He also says that he passed the city of Västerås and traveled nearly 15 miles from it when all this happened. And that would have placed him here. So, the memory. We know he called his brother. We also know that he stopped where a road that is 2 lanes turns into a 1-lane road. So we could establish this. And when we brought the witnesses back to this point of observation, it showed that it wasn't really like this. I mean, witnesses are as they are. We all have very bad memory. We don't tell anything exactly as we experienced it. So when we checked his telephone records, because he called his brother, we could see that the observation was made between 6:15 and 6:20, not 7, which is a completely different ballgame, of course. When you're going to check an observation, you must know exactly where he was and when it happened. He also told us that he was at this point 15 miles from Västerås, but when we went back with him, we could establish that he had driven 3 miles from Västerås. So there was a completely different story, really. What he saw was the same, but where he was quite different. We also checked the local airport, and there were no air traffic, it seemed, from it, because the airport at Västerås was closed. But what does that mean, really? If an airport is closed, is there no airplanes flying there? No, there could be airplanes flying from a closed airport, especially airplanes like these smaller ones. And this airplane you see on this picture, this Cessna 172, was flying with an instructor and his pupil. They were out training for night flying, and it landed on Västerås Airport at 6:25. We asked the military for their radar returns, and we got their radar returns from this time frame, and we could show that this airplane passed exactly over Stefan Johansson's position at 6:16. So the telephone records, the on-site investigation showed that this airplane was passing, but it was not that low. It was nearly 300 yards above him. And of course, you cannot throw a can of soda at that height. And what they saw was this pulsating light, which the airplane had on it, a green navigation light and a strobe light, which made a blue light together. He also saw this air ventilation shaft you can see at top of the aircraft. So thanks to a very, very good investigation, I should say, we could pinpoint the answer for this observation. So let's take a look at some of the unknowns. This lady is Gunilla Lindholm, and in the early summer of 1980, she was traveling with a friend on this gravel road, not far from her family's cottage outside Hedemora in the middle of Sweden. She and her friend suddenly saw a craft coming to the right of their car. It was like a flattened egg with short wings and a very small cockpit. This was in broad daylight, and they could see this object. It was just maybe 20 and 30 yards to the right of them, very, very close. They stopped the car and they could see and draw this form of the object. They could also see that this strange craft, it was flying straight towards the building you could see on the picture I first showed you. And they did understand that it would collide with the building. This is a reconstruction. But instead of colliding, the two ladies could see the object stop just 1 or 2 yards in front of the house. Like some suddenly aboard this object had realized that, wow, we are going to collide. And it hung there for maybe 10 or 15 seconds. And then it lifted straight up in the air and flew away over the house and went away over the forest. The two ladies went back home and they talked to their husbands, and they were laughed out, and they kept their mouths shut for 20 years until I met Gunilla at a talk I gave in her hometown. And after that, we went to this site and she told me the story. I also interviewed her lady friend, and she gave exactly the same story. It's a very strange object, and it seemed to defy gravity, and it didn't really look like anything that could fly. The wings were too small. It looked like something from a Donald Duck magazine, really. Another quite different observation I will give you is this Swedish fighter pilot, Sven Hjalmarsson. He was flying from an air base called F-12 in Kalmar in the southeast of Sweden. He had an experience in 1977, but in 1999 he called UFO-Sweden to tell us about it. I made a long interview with Sven Hjalmarsson, and that was the only interview I could make, because just a year afterwards he was killed in an aircraft accident when he was flying in a helicopter trying to rescue people at a very high mountain called Kebnekaise in the north of Sweden. And his helicopter was blown into the massif of the mountain, and all of people aboard perished. But I made this only interview with him, and you can listen to it. I will show you a video made by some of my colleagues at Dagens Nyheter a couple of years ago, and it is translated with text in English, so I hope you can follow, even though he's telling his story in Swedish. När vi lyssnar på Sven Hjalmarsson nu ska vi veta att här är han på väg och ska identifiera det här okända.
Det var ju en normal flygövning. Jag låg över öster om mellan Öland och Gotland, vanliga flygövningar. Som jag låg på när såna här rutinövningar man ligger och kör. Så fick jag order identifiera okänt då. Och så gick jag mot. Då läser ju marken in ungefärlig höjd och avstånd och sånt där hela tiden. Och sen när jag kom in så att min radar började så att säga, innanför räckvidden på den, då fick jag ju lås på det här föremålet. Och det var i princip stillastående. Men det hade kanske det är lite svårt att säga om det rörde sig fart under 100 kilometer så att säga med den här radarn som satt i 35an. Det var lite svårt att uttala sig om, men väldigt låg fart. Och så flög jag höll Mach 09 hela inflygningen mot det här föremålet. Omkring 1000 meter låg jag på. När jag kommer in så jag börjar närma kommer in mot avstånd 10 kilometer. Då börjar det här föremålet accelerera och rakt upp bara. Så jag tänder upp och hänger på. Och har ju jag kommer väl in kanske, det är svårt att säga hur nära jag var. Kan vara någonstans mellan 6-8 kilometer som närmast. Och det jag menar från stillastående och sen axa ifrån en 35a då som har full PS, det är duktigt gjort. Och sen när jag passerade 10 000 meter då hade jag i princip, jag hade väl 70 grader stig på den här maskinen jag satt i. Och då försvann den utanför radarns räckvidd rakt upp i rymden.
He got this order to try to identify this unknown object from a radar unit deep underground in the middle of Sweden. But of course they saw it on their radar screen first. And after maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, Sven Hjalmarsson got it on his radar screen on board this one of the best aircrafts at the time, this J-35 Dragon. The strange thing was that this object was hovering, still, not moving, and suddenly started to fly upwards, straight upwards. And even though he put everything he could into his fighter jet, the object outpaced him and vanished. He didn't report this because on the radar screen on ground, they couldn't see movements horizontally. They could only see movements horizontally, sorry. They couldn't see movements that was straight up. So to them, it just vanished. But when coming home that evening, he told his wife, which I also interviewed, that he was shattered about. He was so upset that he had never seen anything like it before. And she says to me that he was thinking of this all the time. He couldn't really deal with it. So you can see many similarities to what you're reading about nowadays from the US. But this was in 1977, so it's not the first time that objects are traveling very, very fast from sea level to out into space. There was another observation by a Swedish fighter pilot during the Ghost Rocket wave in 1946. I will tell you shortly about the Ghost Rocket wave as well, but I will not get into any detail because it would take all the afternoon. But this is a drawing about showing a fighter pilot called Gunnar Irholm who flew from the F1 Air Force Station in Västerås on August 14, 1946. He was to make this flight a little more to the east, but there was a thundercloud with a storm that he really didn't want to go into. So he made another turn, he flew up to Dalecarlia, and when coming near a church here in central of Sweden, he and his navigator suddenly sees this 15 yards long object, very thin. No wings, no cockpit, no tail fin. It was 250 yards from the ground. And he realized that this is one of those ghost rockets I have read about. So here you can see his own drawing. The red is his fighter jet, and the black is the ghost rocket. So he's trying to get in touch with this ghost rocket and identify it. And he flies after it. But after just a couple of minutes, this ghost rocket flies straight into this storm cloud, which he really didn't want to fly into, and vanished there. And you can see he's turning to his left, trying to see if he can find the ghost rocket on the other side of this storm cloud, but he didn't do that. So very short about the ghost rocket, because I think them as maybe one of the most strange UFO flaps in the history of UFOs. In a number of cases, people saw those ghost rockets crashing into lakes. Everyone crashed into lakes. Not a single one crashed on land. Me and Anders Liljegren at AFU, we found the ghost rocket files in the early 1980s. They were classified at that time, and we were not able to take any copies, but I took those pictures anyway. They were kept at the war archives, and we could read them. And after, I think, 1.5 years, they were declassified and were made public to us. I will tell you about one of those strange ghost rocket observations that happened not in 1946, but in 1948. So they still flew over Sweden in 1948, and they still are from time to time. And at this point, at 11 a.m. on July the 18th, 1948, a man was sitting reading his newspaper outside his cottage east of Stockholm. This water is called the Vomfjärden. He suddenly heard a noise coming from the south, and he looked up, and in his diary he writes, unusual projectile, 2 yards in length, 100 yards over the lake. The speed is high. He could see these rockets suddenly turn to the right and turning straight into the lake, as it had discovered it and wanted to land there. And before it sinks, this man on the shore sees reflections from the metal. He takes a friend and a rowing boat. He goes out to the site of impact, but it's 18 yards deep, so he couldn't really see anything. But since this witness was not an ordinary witness, but the commander-in-chief, the supreme commander of the Swedish Armed Forces, Mr. At that time General, of course, Helge Jung, this didn't stop with him seeing this. He started a reconnaissance aircrafts around Sweden. He started a radar alert, and he sent a special equipped boat to the lake, trying to find this object. This was top secret. Nobody outside, a very, very small part of military men knew about this. We found this search vessel's log in the war archives. And this ship was a specially designated ship to assist sunken submarines that was sent to the lake. And you can see it says search after object. It didn't say anything who had seen it or what it was. Because they went there and they were there for days and days and days trying to find what it was on the bottom of the lake. People wondered, of course, but they spread a rumor that it was a wife who had dropped her diamond ring into the lake, and they were helping to find it. In 1999, I located the head of the diving crew on board this vessel, Mr. Hilding Bjurstedt, and he said that they couldn't find anything. It was several yards of mud in the lake, and the object could very well be hidden down there, but they couldn't see it. In November 1948, the US Air Force sent a couple of intelligence officers to Sweden, and they were told about this story, but they were never told it was the commander-in-chief who had seen it. It only says in their report coming home to the US again, it was a Swedish technical expert who had seen it. But the document also says that the Swedes, they think that it was caused by a flying saucer. So, is the object still there? I have read the diary from Helge Jung, the commander-in-chief, and he made several notes about this search. But the last note in his diary is the most puzzling, because it says, Major Frank Servell reports a catch in Våmfjärden. Divers go down tomorrow. At that time, this search vessel was not there. I don't know who found something. I don't know which divers went down. There is not a single trace in the archives what happened next. So it's still a mystery. Maybe they found something. Maybe they didn't. And last item, I will give you a very short notice about a case we are working with right now. This also happened near water and also near a military training area. It was July 16th, 2023, and Mr. Ted Hedlund and his girlfriend and their little son was out in a boat. The time was 9:50 p.m. and the sun was very near the horizon. And Mr. Hedlund was driving the boat, and the other two were down in the cabin. What's transpired, Mr. Hedlund here shows to our field investigator, Karin Taxing. It shows us a ball, silvery ball, but this was much, much larger in real life, of course. He could see a ball like this, maybe a meter in diameter, suddenly coming, raised itself from behind the waves. And the waves were quite heavy. The wind was quite strong, but this object, this ball of silver, stayed completely still in the wind. And it started to fly near the boat, so he tried to avoid it. And at that point, the silver ball traveled in wider and wider curves as it vanished at the horizon. He could see it for maybe 15 or 20 seconds before it was gone. And he could see that the sun was shining on this hull, which was silvery. This case is still under investigation, and we have at this point no real clue what it was. And with that, I thank you for listening to me, and I'm open to answering questions.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clas. That's amazing. That whole silver ball. How big was that silver ball?
Maybe a yard.
Maybe a yard or so, huh? It's interesting because that keeps popping up around here and a few other places too. So, anyhow, does anybody have any questions? None here. Fargo, you guys got anything?
Oh, I have a few questions for Clas, that's for sure.
Okay, good. You go ahead. Here at Rapids, I'm turning this around so Clas can actually see who he's talking to today, or was talking to. If
Oh,
anybody
nice,
does not
nice.
want to be,
Nice
anybody
to see
does
you.
not want to be on YouTube, just raise your hand now, and I'll try to clear it out. Good, everyone's here. It makes it easy. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Clas. Go ahead, Anna.
We are a three-part audience here. We're in Grand Rapids, we're in Fargo, and we also have folks joining us online. And we have a fair amount of people that watch our videos after the meeting when they're posted online. So I also find that last case that you're working on right now, Clas, really interesting. I myself saw something very similar, almost identical, near Lake Superior, right on the shoreline. So it'd be interesting to find out what you discover on that case.
I will keep you posted.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I have a question for you personally. I'm wondering, prior to the development of airplanes and blimps and things like that, what is the history of UFO sightings in Sweden?
That's a good question, and it's a good question for any country in the world, I should say. Say before 1947, we start there. Nobody talked, of course, about flying saucers. And even during the Ghost Rocket Wave in 1946, no one talked about aliens or alien visitations. Going further back, we have meetings with entities and sometimes with crafts, but not very often, I should say. Most of the documents I have read from the 1800s and the early 1900s are of meetings with entities of different shapes, mostly catalogued as folklore, of course. Nobody at that point, very, very seldom at least, talked about aliens from other worlds. They were talking about elves and trolls and things like that. So the notion that this is something from another world is quite new in Sweden. It's from 1947, from the Kenneth Arnold era. Up until that, we had a huge UFO wave in the 1930s called the ghost aircrafts, and hundreds of people saw those ghost aircrafts. Of course, there were aircrafts at that time, but those aircrafts were flying in very heavy weather and mostly seen as lights in the sky, to be honest. No one at that point talked about aliens either. They were just pointing in the direction of Russia or Germany, that they were intruders, military intruders, which they also thought during the Ghost Rocket Wave. That was their first-hand choice, of course. So we have a lot of stories about meetings with entities, lots of them, but very few about meetings with craft. That is to summarize it.
Interesting. Is there any questions here in Fargo? Do we see any in the chat, Jer? I'm not able to see the chat. It looks like we might
No.
have a couple of things,
No,
comments.
I don't see anything in chat. I don't see anybody raising their hands, so.
Clas, can you tell me a little bit about any efforts to look into the water areas where the ghost rockets allegedly went in? Have they found anything? Other than the dive that you mentioned that probably happened, but you don't have a lot of information, are there any other reports or anything about diving to see if there's any disturbance to the, you know, the ground underneath the lake or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, during 1946, the military sent research parties and divers to several of the lakes. They could only find indentations at the floor of the lake and large stones thrown up on the shore and water lilies cut off floating, showing that something had crashed. They put great effort in trying to find those ghost rockets, but not a single scrap of metal or anything. But of course, those ghost rockets landings and crashes have still occurred in Sweden. And in 1980, there was a famous observation by two people at the very north of Sweden, when they could see this ghost rocket not crash, but flying over them, turning around 180 degrees, landing with a splash and sinking in front of them. And that lake, Lake Namajaure, I have headed 2 expeditions to. We have found radar returns in the mud that something rests there. So we will go back again with another kind of instruments that will show this object, whatever it is, in 3 dimensions. We have only seen it in 2 dimensions this far. So hopefully this year, I hope that, I cannot promise, we will be back. It's very complicated. It's not walking distance. We have to carry, we have to fly with helicopters, and of course it's a national park, so you cannot do what you want there. You have to pay a fee, you have to get green light from the authorities. But we have this GPS point where this object has given us at least a radar return, a ground penetrating radar. So yeah, we must go back, of course.
Well, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you find in there. You've got my curiosity picked, so we'll definitely be following up with you and making sure that we post any of the information that you have on that on our website.
If you find it, I can be back and give a talk.
I would love that.
Oh, that would be great.
Any other questions, anybody?
Hi, I came in a little late, so I apologize, and I hope that you didn't mention anything about this, but you were talking about there's approximately 11 million citizens of Sweden, and I think you said that 1 million of the 11 million have had sightings of some kind, but that they don't speak about it. And so I'm just wondering if there's like a cultural reason. I know you told some stories about some ladies that went home, told their husband, their husbands laughed at them. You know, is it becoming more open now, you know, like with organizations like you that put more validity to these things, where people are feeling more comfortable sort of speaking up about their experiences, or is it still very much sort of like you don't say anything like that here?
Good question. It is much better today. Since a couple of years back, I think the tide has turned quite a lot, and I have been in 2 Swedish documentaries last year, long documentaries, very nicely done, and that has made lots of people coming to us telling their stories. I am giving talks nearly every week around Sweden. I've never laughed at, and I think that those people that has not told their stories, they don't do that for 2 different reasons. One of the reasons is, of course, that they don't want to be ridiculed, but the other reason is that they don't really know where to turn. They are not sure who would like to listen to them. I mean, we are quite well known in Sweden, UFO-Sweden, but many people doesn't know about us anyway. So they see something the next day. Okay, it happened yesterday, and the time goes, and well, if you don't tell from the beginning, you will not do it. Except when I'm out giving lectures, always people coming telling stories from the 1970s and 80s. Seldom new sightings. It's very, very often old stories, very old stories. But I think people are taking this very much more seriously now than we did just a couple of years ago. Yeah.
We find
Yeah, I
this
definitely
thing
where
here
it's
as
going.
well.
All right, well, we got a question over here in Rapids.
Hi there. In the last couple of months here, we've had a lot of drones in our news. Lots of drones flying over different places in the U.S. And I've also seen some reports of this drone phenomena happen around the world. I'm wondering if you've also seen a uptick increase of these kind of things in Sweden. What your take is on it?
Yesterday, I was in a meeting with the 58 UFO researchers here in Europe. And at the meeting was also the head of GAPAN, which is the French official UFO research unit. It's paid for by the government. And we talked about the drones, and we have not seen any uptick in that way as in the US. I also talked with the head of the Swedish police drone squad, we can call it. We had, for a year ago, a flap of drones over Sweden. In just a couple of weeks, the police got, I think, 200 reports or something like that. And I talked to him about that, and he said nearly only a handful, maybe 10 observations were drones. The rest were aircraft, planets, whatever, because people were suddenly aware that you should watch the skies. And most people haven't a clue what to see in the sky when they turn their head up. I mean, right now you have Venus, you have Mars, you have Jupiter and Saturn clearly to be seen in the sky. UFO-Sweden got loads of reports about the planets. But what do they report? Drones. They think they are seeing drones. So no,
It
we
is
haven't seen that. No.
It is kind of funny to mistake a planet for a drone, but you know, I can see it. Yeah, a little a little bit of mass hysteria, absolutely. Anyone else? No? Okay, we're good in Rapids.
Any other questions here in Fargo? Well, I personally could ask you questions all day, Clas, but I won't do that. Hopefully I can see you sometime soon in the next year or two at another conference, and I'll be able to ask away on all those questions that I have for you. But
Yeah.
I want to thank you very much for your presentation. This was really interesting information. And we will make sure that everybody gets updated on future books and any of that progress on that one that you're working on. I'm really interested in what your results will be in that lake.
Thank you, Anna. It was very nice to be invited to this, and I wish you guys good luck with your research. And it's very important what you do. It's very important that people like us are looking into this, turning every stone, and learn more about this, and tell the others outside your community that there is something worth researching.
Agreed, 100%.
Maple root beer. Not bad.
Cheers.
You enjoy that, right? And everybody else is still here. Meeting's over. You feel free to go home. Can't stay here. Just go. Gravity waves, consciousness, Hans World. Huh.